You're listening to the Footballogists with Kevin Gillikin and the Skipper Dude, covering the basics of sports betting.
You got an extra 2.5 points, so you won the bet 30.5 to 30. That's how point spreads work.
In-depth analysis of every NFL spread.
So Vegas is giving Baltimore with the win and 4 points to do so. Now, I think that's a crazy bet. Baltimore is a really good team. Miami is a terrible team. 4 points is not nearly enough. Baltimore should win by at least 1 touchdown. Easy. Bank it. Bet it.
Plus yearly and daily fantasy football.
Will he be the top fantasy quarterback for a year? No, but Jimmy Garoppolo is going to have a fantastic week 1. He's got all the people around him, and he's playing against a terrible Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense.
All with a focus on the human element.
We're talking about another Belichick disciple in his first year after almost zero experience as a coordinator in the NFL, and he has to somehow manage this quarterback situation with Josh Rosen and Ryan Fitzpatrick. Add that to Rosen's bad attitude and anything else going on in the Miami locker room, and it's just aiming for disaster for the season, for fantasy, for everything for the Miami Dolphins in 2019.
Please gamble responsibly.
I'm Kevin Gillikin, host of the Footballogists. Today we talk all things NFC South, a division absolutely loaded with quarterback talent. But there are still some question marks. Can Cam Newton stay healthy? Can Drew Brees remain young for one more season? Can Jameis Winston take that next step with Bruce Arians as head coach? And can Matt Ryan continue his dominance, especially at home? That and much, much more in this show, where we're going to bet each team's over-under in terms of total wins. And before we get into that, though, we're going to send it over to the Skipper Dude, who's going to tell us the basics of sports betting, all the basics, everything you need to know. Now, if you've already listened to a few episodes of the show, head over to the 9-minute 30 mark, and we'll pick right up with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But first up, here is the Skipper Dude with the basics of sports betting.
Thanks, Kevin, for having me on and asking me to do a little overview of how NFL gambling works. I think this should be fun. So first of all, if you've ever been to a casino and you know how a casino works, you know that casinos don't actually make their money gambling. Casinos make their money facilitating gambling for others like you or me. If you play blackjack or craps or roulette, the casino is taking the other side of bets that you're laying down, but they've openly rigged the odds to where they will always win over time. Maybe not on 1 or 2 or even 10 particular gamblers, but with hundreds of thousands or millions of gamblers making what probably amount to hundreds of millions of bets, they will always win. The odds of every roll or every hand is very slightly in their favor, and that's what they count on over time to make money. Now, live poker, and I'm not talking about poker machines, but actually live poker, is a little different. Casinos are not involved in betting at all with poker. They're simply dealing the cards and taking a small cut of every hand or of the action. Some poker players will win big, others will lose big, but casinos will always take a very small cut on every game, and those wins, those cuts over time are what help make them rich. Now, sports gambling from a casino perspective is kind of a hybrid between blackjack and poker. So technically, when you make a bet, you are betting against the sports book. But the job of the sports book is to see to it that an equal number of dollars, not bettors, but dollars, are being bet on both teams. That's where they make their money. Now I'll explain. So let's say there's a game, hypothetically, in 2019, actually, this will come up, with Miami at New England. Okay, on paper, this is going to be a total blowout. Now, if casinos were to just take a bet on who will win this game, 98 or maybe even $99.50 out of every 100 are going to be bet on the Patriots. And when, as is likely, the Patriots win, it would leave a disaster for the casino. So they can't take that bet. Remember, casinos make their money little bits at a time when equal number of dollars are bet on both teams. And here's how they do it. So they have 2 different ways of evening things out and making the betting on both teams roughly equal. The first is called the point spread. Now let me switch over to a real life week 1 2019 game, and that's the Broncos at Oakland to play the Raiders. The Raiders are the favorite in the game, so to make the betting equal, casinos basically gift the Broncos 2.5 points, which is what they've done. So let's say the Raiders win that game 30-28. The Raiders won the game, but from a betting perspective, if you took the Broncos, you got an extra 2.5 points, so you won the bet 30.5-30. That's how point spreads work. Now, when you made your bet and you took the Broncos and the 2.5 points, you probably saw a line of -110. What that means is that you needed $110 to win 100. That's the -110. Now, to make the numbers here a little easier, we'll just say $11 to win 10. The guy who took the Raiders and gave up 2.5 points, he also had a line of -110, and he also bet $11 to win 10. So combined, the two of you bet $22, 11 plus 11. You won the bet, so you won 21. You won your original $11 plus the 10 that you won, the 11 to win 10. The Raider better got nothing. So the two of you combined bet $22. You got 21 back. Where did the extra dollar go? The casino kept it as a service fee. That's how they make their money. Now, the other standard way to bet on football games is what's called the line. It's fairly similar to the -110 I just discussed above, except that with the line, there is no point spread, and to win your bet, you only need your team to win the game. Now, it gets a little bit more complicated, the numbers do, but let's go back to the Broncos at the Raiders. The Broncos are a +125 to win that game, and the Raiders are a -135. What that means is that if you want to bet on the Broncos, a $100 bet on the Broncos will win $125, and a $135 bet on the Raiders will win $100. Okay, that's how lines work, and basically the same type of thing on that spread between 125 and 135. That's where Vegas makes its money. All right, so now beyond the basics, casinos also try to spice things up with bets like parlays, where you pick anywhere from 2 to about 10 or even more games, and you win money based on the number of games that you win. You actually have to win all of the games, and if you win them all, that's why it's called a parlay. You win multiple times your money. So let's say you picked 2 games and won them both. You'll win 2 times 2, or about 4 times your money, less the casino take. If you picked 5 games and won, you'll win 2 to the 5th power. You'll win 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, or 32 times your money. In real life, it's usually closer to about 30 times your money because, the casino is going to get its take. But you get the idea. So finally, I want to make a quick admonishment if you're considering betting on NFL games. I spent 2 NFL seasons in Las Vegas trying to win money betting football in addition to my regular job. And it is a whole lot tougher than you think. On paper, you actually only need to win 52.5% of the time. That's a calculation I did a while back in order to make money, but it's so much tougher to do that, it's hard to even imagine. In fact, the better I got at analyzing games during those 2 seasons, the worse I actually did betting. And I kind of learned how extremely far away I was from being able to forecast games well enough to make money consistently. For me, I got to kind of where I was like a scratch golfer betting wise. Pretty decent, but I was nowhere near being a PGA pro and nowhere good enough to make money consistently, because it's only those PGA pros of bettors who are going to actually make money consistently. So, as entertainment, sports gambling can be a ton of fun. I love it. It can help amplify the fan experience on game day and just make for a lot more adrenaline in watching the NFL. But as an addiction or as a money-making career, just don't go there. Just don't. Have fun with it and keep things in moderation. Kevin, back to you.
For anyone new to this show, we are all about the human element in terms of the National Football League. So we do, of course, pay attention to the stats. We go into the numbers, especially regarding the offensive line and the defense. But we really like to focus on these players as people, as human beings. What makes them tick and what makes things more difficult than normal for them. Now, a lot of that is injuries, it's new schemes, it's the travel, It's drama in the locker room. These are the things we really focus on. And in the regular season, we're going to bet every single game against the spread using this method. We're going to talk about, again, injuries, travel, drama, etc. Now, we will obviously go a little bit into the stats, but we like to focus on these few things that affect these players as men. Now, today, as I said earlier, we're talking about the NFC South. And it's a really intriguing division, in my opinion. It's a division that has so many question marks, and it has one team that's really predicted to be a Super Bowl caliber team, and two that are kind of, flirting around playoff teams, and one that no one really knows what's going to happen. And I think the one where we really want to start and focus on for this segment is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And they are a really intriguing team because obviously, they have a first-year head coach in Bruce Arians, a longtime veteran, a guy who's highly respected. But honestly, he's kind of a guy that has people don't really know what to think of him. Now, he's had some success. He had some success in Indianapolis when Chuck Pagano was sick with cancer. He had a little bit of success in Arizona, but obviously he was fired in Arizona, and he lost his job because he couldn't perform well enough, especially after losing Carson Palmer, who just couldn't really stay healthy. But he did have a couple really good years. He's got a really good offensive mind, and he's a coach that is respected around the league. So we'll have to see what he can do. Now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won 5 games in 2018. They were 5-11, not very good. They were led, half the time by Jameis Winston and half by Fitzmagic, Ryan Fitzpatrick, that is. And this year, according to Tipico is for now the website I'm basing the line off of for the over-unders of total wins. Tipico is I believe it's a German company, it's a European company, and I take the lines from them because I have a harder time getting proper betting information from the U.S. since, of course, I live in Germany. So hopefully that's something that will change. I'd like to work with someone else in the future, but for now, we will work with Tipico, which is plenty good. It's just a little more focus on European sports, but it has a little bit of NFL as the NFL gets more and more popular here in Germany and in Europe. Tipico has the Buccaneers at 6.5 wins, which means that if you bet the over, you think they're going to win 7 or more. If you bet the under, you think they're going to win 6 or less. In this show, I want to say if I'm going to buy the Buccaneers, it means they're going to win 7 or more. If I'm selling them, they will win 6 or less. That's the whole point of the 6.5 wins, 6.5 wins according to Tipico. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, of course, have Jameis Winston, one of the more odd quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, you go just Google Jameis Winston and you'll just find the most bizarre stories. Him having the video of the pregame where he's pretending to eat a win or eat the W, which is his fingers. I mean, just go look it up. Look up Jameis Winston pregame speech. It's bizarre. The dude is something else. But he's also a very talented quarterback. He's a guy who's, his first pick in the draft a couple years back. Geez, it's got to be 2014-15 now. He's got all the talents you need, really, to be a very successful quarterback. But he's a guy who he makes bad decisions enough. He's kind of streaky, kind of like Ryan Fitzpatrick, ironically. He's streaky. He throws a lot of picks. He tries to squeeze the ball into areas where he shouldn't. But he's got a good arm. He can make every throw on the football field. And at times, I think he can be a good leader. I don't really know what to think of him. I think when you watch videos of him eating the W, you look at his teammates around him and they're just shaking their heads like, dude, you're an idiot. And I think those are the types of things that do lose respect for you. And as a quarterback, I think you really have to have that respect from your teammates. I think, for example, Andrew Luck is not a leader, it seems. He's not a guy who's rah-rah. He's not a guy who goes and riles his teammates up. But he's a guy who's just respected. His teammates in the league respect him. He's a good dude. He's a guy who's tough. He's strong. He says the right things, even if he says it in a mild-mannered kind of redneck type of a way. And he's a very smart guy too, Andrew Luck. And he earned the respect. Now, I don't know if Jameis Winston has it. And I think that is an important factor. It's not everything, of course. He has his statistics in 2018 were really, really fair. I mean, they had the top passing offense in football. The Buccaneers had the top passing offense in football. They had 5,358 passing yards between Winston and Fitzpatrick. I know it's fairly shocking. You can't really believe it. So when you're saying top passing offense, now it doesn't mean necessarily they were good enough to win a lot of games. They won 5 games, but they were good enough to pass for 5,358 yards. That's pretty good. So there is something on this offense. They have some talent on this offense. They've got, Mike Evans at wide receiver, who I love. They've got Godwin at receiver, who's a really good second guy. They've got Howard at tight end and Brait also at tight end. So they have some really talented guys that Jameis Winston can pass to. And honestly, this is a team I really like going into 2019. I just had one of my primary drafts. I know no one gives a darn about my draft, but I picked Jameis Winston and Mike Evans. I thought they were going to be a really good connection this year. I think they're being undervalued and underrated, partly because the defenses in this division are not great. Now, people keep thinking that New Orleans is going to be really good, but they've really got some big-time injuries up front, and the rest of their team is not, on defense, it doesn't jump out to me. I think they could be okay, but I don't think they're going to be a great defense. Now, the Panthers and Atlanta also not great, which we'll obviously talk about more in the coming segments. So I really like those two in fantasy, and thus I really like them to put up a lot of yards. And so on offense, I actually like this team. Now, their running game, they were really not good last year. Their second-year running back, Ronald Jones, was injured all of the last season. I think he played a couple downs in the first game, I think. But he's coming back and he's healthy, and they really hope that he's going to be a boost to their running game. And last year, Peyton Barber really didn't do much to impress. I think he had under 4 yards average per carry. And hopefully they're hoping Ronald Jones can pick up the slack and give a little bit of help to Jameis Winston in that offense. And I think that Bruce Arians is a guy who will be able to do that and to figure it out, how to help Winston and how to push them past just being a great passing attack. Now, the biggest problem from last year was a legendarily bad defense. They did add an aggressive defensive coordinator, a good defensive coordinator. Todd Bowles is very respected. He didn't have great success as a head coach in New York for the Jets, but he is still a good coordinator, and I don't think anyone would deny that. He's a guy who's going to bring some heat. He's going to should bring at least a little bit of help to the defense. Now, Bleacher Report has them ranked as the 31st defense heading into 2019. They were the 31st in 2018 as well, according to Bleacher Report, and I believe also according to yards given up. So they were a really, really bad defense. One of the worst, I believe in the first 8 games, they are one of the worst defenses in the history of the NFL. So not good there. If you have Jameis Winston and Mike Evans and other players on the Tampa Bay offense, you're probably in good shape because the defense is still going to give up a lot of points. But I think they're going to be improved. They're going to be improved. And I believe with Bruce Arians, with Todd Bowles, that's going to help get this team in the right shape. They're not going to have teams that are just going to quit. Their defense is going to be at least mildly respectable. And in that case, I believe that's 1 or 2 win advantage from their 5-win season in 2018. Now, again, as we talked about, Arians, very respected. He comes in, and I think he immediately controls a locker room. At least that's my impression. He's kind of a bad-mouthed, no-nonsense kind of funny dude. I watched, I think, some show, maybe Hard Knocks, something in the Arizona locker room. And I think that players tend to like him. He seems like a guy that players like. Now, the question is, can he turn them around in 1 year? It's questionable, but I think they could be a team that really goes from worst to maybe not first, but to middle in 2019. And Byron Leftwich is their new offensive coordinator. He's in his first year. He's extremely highly respected as a football mind, but he's young. Obviously, he was a former quarterback only a couple years ago, it seems. So he's kind of new to coordinating. I think this is his first season ever as a coordinator. So obviously that could be a bit of a problem that the team is going to have to learn his offense. He's going to have to work with Jameis Winston and figure things out. And in the first year, that's usually a bit rough for the offense. But if he's really if he's on point, I think he could, with Arians, really fix Jameis Winston. I think Leftwich could be a great hire as offensive coordinator, which, again, as I talk more and more about this team, I like them more and more. There are weaknesses. I actually don't have. I usually have the offensive line rank, which I apparently do not have here. I believe they are below average, though, according to Pro Football Focus. I think they are not one of the best. I think they're one of the worst offensive lines predicted going into 2019. They give up 15 sacks in preseason. 15 sacks in this preseason. So that is a big question mark, of course. That's actually probably the biggest question mark aside from a new offensive coordinator. And if Jameis Winston can be a true leader and not act like an idiot and not, no stealing crab legs or eating his fingers. If the offensive line can hold up, if they can be decent, if they can give Winston enough time to pass, I think this team can be average. I think they can win 7 or 8 games. I like their coaching staff. I like their quarterback. And I really like the talent on offense. So if the defense can be okay, if the offensive line can hold up, I think they can win 2 games more than they did last year. This isn't going to be a great team, but because of a quarterback and coach, which are the 2 primary factors, I think this team can win 7 games. So I would buy them at 7 wins. Again, Typico predicts them at 6.5, but I don't love them. I like them. I don't love them. I think they're a team that's going to surprise some people. I think their offense could be really good again, depending on the offensive line. But the defense is just not improved enough, and it's first year in each scheme on offense and defense, and that doesn't really bode for a playoff type team. And I've heard some analysts predicting them to go to the playoffs, and I just don't see it. I think they've got some talent, but they're not there yet. Maybe next year, after a little bit of continuity, and if Jameis Winston can take a couple more steps, become that leader, become a guy who doesn't make big mistakes, and maybe next year I will have them going to the playoffs. This year, I've got them at 7, possibly 8 wins. Part of why I like them, part of why I'm buying them, is because I don't love some of the teams in this division like others do. So to wrap up, I'm buying the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I say they'll win around 7 games, so I buy them. I don't love them. If you're a Tampa Bay fan, go ahead and bet this. Go ahead and bet a little bit of money on them. Take them to win 7+. But if you're not a Tampa Bay fan, just steer clear. It's practically a push, and it's not a team I would really want to hang my hat on. And that's Tampa Bay. So up next, we're going to talk about one of the biggest question marks in all of football. Cam Newton, can he stay healthy? If he does, this could be a playoff team. If he doesn't, this could be one of the worst teams in the National Football League. Carolina Panthers up next. The Carolina Panthers. What a question mark they are. Cam Newton is coming off shoulder surgery in the offseason and is not really sure he's going to play in the opening game. I mean, people think he might. It's questionable. They think he probably will, but nobody actually knows. No one actually knows. Is Cam Newton going to be the guy? Now, probably, but we're not sure. Now, they say he looks healthy. Actually, I guess it's actually more of a foot problem. Excuse me. I'm looking at CBS Sports right now that his shoulder actually isn't the problem. So this is actually a bigger problem, that he has now multiple injuries. I really, really honestly worry about Cam Newton. I can see Cam Newton becoming the next Aaron Rodgers in terms of a guy who's so banged up. He was so banged up in his early career because of more of his choices rather than a terrible offensive line like Andrew Luck. But because of that, he could retire. He could say, you know what, I've earned my money and I hurt. He seems like a guy who doesn't always love football. I think when things are going well, he loves football. When he's not, it's not great. And I think that's hard for him. And I think that he could be a guy who, if they don't have success this year, if he gets banged up again, he could be gone. Now, if he doesn't play, the backup quarterback is Kyle Allen. Kyle Allen. Have you heard of him? I haven't either. He's got 1 year of NFL experience, comes out of Houston, 23 years old. Perhaps Will Grier also. He's ranked as their third string quarterback. He's a rookie, but did not have a good preseason. So neither of these guys stuck out at all on the preseason, didn't have very good preseasons. Yeah. They're a mess. If Newton doesn't play any games this year, they're done. I mean, done. Toast. Count them out. And Newton's been so banged up, I just don't know. I don't. This team is hard to predict because they do have talent. You look at their offense, and there's absolutely talent there. Their offensive line is ranked 10th by Pro Football Focus going into 2019. That's solid. Good offensive line. One of the top 10. Cam Newton obviously can be a very good quarterback, but he can be a very bad quarterback. Last year, he was 19th in QBR. Obviously, he missed some games due to a shoulder injury. 19th in QBR. Below Joe Flacco in QBR in 2018. He was 23rd in pass yards per game with 242. He had 24 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. He's been banged up. I understand the Cam Newton love. I understand why people like this guy. He's got all the talent in the world, and he's shown it. He can make all the passes. He can run, etc. But what has he done lately? What has he done lately to tell me that he's going to be a really good quarterback that's healthy? I don't know. I really don't know. Now, they do have, obviously, talent on that offense. McCaffrey is a stud. I've tried to draft him in every fantasy team I have, if I have the choice. He's one of the top 3 running backs in football. Catches the ball out of the backfield better than just about anybody. It looks like he's gotten a lot stronger. I hope that's a good thing. The dude is a monster. And he's a monster. He's a beast. His arms are like wider than my body, and I'm not a small dude. I don't know if that's always good. Sometimes these guys beef up, and it's like, it's a little unnatural. It doesn't look very natural. I mean, I hope it is. I hope there's no green jelly beans going on there. But either way, I don't know if that's always good. But still, he's still a really good running back until he isn't. I definitely have a lot of hopes for him this year. He is my top guy. If I had the first pick in the draft, I would pick McCaffrey. Even over Kamara. Even over Zeke. And even over Barkley. Though Barkley's he's a close one. They also have Greg Olsen, a very veteran tight end who's been really banged up lately. I thought he would retire, honestly. He's a talented guy, a guy Cam Newton trusts, but can he be healthy enough? Big question mark. It's a big question mark. Can he stay on the field? We don't know. Now, again, so it's like, can Cam Newton play? Will he play 16? Will Olsen play 16? I don't love their wide receivers. DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, okay. Yeah, okay. It's not terrible, but I don't love it. And last year he had 788 yards, 2 touchdowns. All right. It's all right. He just doesn't blow me away. 6 foot 210, coming out of Maryland. Solid, but not flashy. And I think you're going to need a little more flash on this offense. McCaffrey can't do everything. He can't do everything. Now, the defense, people always think of this as a good, or I shouldn't say people, I should say I always think of this as a good defense because, like Luke Kuechly, Thomas Davis. But Davis is gone. Kuechly's also constantly injured with head issues. Maybe the best middle linebacker of our time, of our generation, but he's also hurt a lot. Can he stay healthy? This defense is ranked 24th going into 2019 by Bleacher Report. They were 19th in points allowed in 2018, 27th in passing touchdowns allowed in 2018. Ron Rivera, their head coach, will be back calling plays on defense, which is something I don't really love. That's something that I think it's a distraction. I don't like when head coaches call plays either on offense or defense, even if they're really good at it. I just think that's something that you should hire someone else to do. When you're doing both jobs, you're taking away from both. I firmly believe that. You can't be totally concentrated on calling plays on defense when you're the head coach and vice versa. I don't like that. Now, I'm sure there are examples where it works. I mean, Belichick's done it. Obviously, Rivera's done it and had success. But in general, I don't think that's good. The Panthers have the 16th hardest schedule per sportingline.com, so they're right in the middle of things there. Nothing really to comment about their schedule. Not brutal, not super easy either. I do think that the division is not as tough as everyone thinks it will be, but almost tougher than people will think too, because I think Tampa Bay is going to be tougher. However, I think the one dominant team in the division that everyone thinks will be dominant, I think will be less dominant than people think. We'll get to that later. Now, their coaching staff is very solid. Ron Rivera in his 9th season at head coach. He's also, again, the defensive coordinator. Or will be calling plays at least. Eric Washington is in his 2nd season as DC, as defensive coordinator, but Rivera will be calling calls, will be calling plays, excuse me. Ron Rivera, known as Riverboat Ron for his risk-taking. He's kind of a coach that likes to gamble a bit, likes to go for it, which I think players enjoy. Norv Turner is in his 2nd year as offensive coordinator. He's been in the NFL forever, 33 years in the NFL. He's been obviously head coach, offensive coordinator, it seems half of the NFL. He was with the San Diego Chargers for many years, coaching against my Denver Broncos. He's respected, but he's a guy who's not proven to be, I think, a great offensive coordinator. Now, he's stuck around long enough to obviously be a very good one, but is he great? Is he a difference maker? I'm not sure. Potentially. So let's take a peek at their schedule, which is ranked right in the middle of things. They open up with 2 games at home. They start this Sunday in just a few days, thank goodness, against the LA Rams. Tough. Now it's at home, but are you telling me the LA Rams are less talented than Carolina? No way. If Cam Newton plays, they're going to bring the house and pound the guy. If Cam Newton doesn't play, they're going to bring the house and pound whoever else. I mean, Wade Phillips is probably my favorite defensive coordinator in football. It's between him and Fangio. They're both great, and I think they're going to absolutely wreck Carolina. Tampa Bay at home, I mean, it's winnable, but again, I like Tampa Bay to be tough at least. It's kind of almost a push. I'll give it to them as a win. At Arizona, that can be a win. Arizona's terrible. At Houston, I think Houston is a better team. At home against Jacksonville, I don't buy Jacksonville like everyone else. So I'll have that as a win. So three wins so far. Tampa Bay, at Tampa Bay, I'll have that as a loss. Then they have the bye. At San Francisco, I actually like San Francisco this year, so I'll give them a loss. Home against Tennessee, I don't like at all. At Green Bay, loss. At home against Atlanta, loss. At New Orleans, loss. At home against Washington, win. At Atlanta, I'll say a loss. At home against Seattle, loss. Indianapolis, win. And at home against New Orleans, I'm actually going to give them a win against New Orleans this year. I say they split it. And so the last game of the season, I say they actually win. But as you see, I have them right around 7 wins. Last year they were 7-9. Tipico has them at 7.5. That's a good line, honestly. I don't. They're going to be 7 or 8 wins. I think that's what I've got them at. They're 7 or 8. So this is a total push for me. I don't buy them. I don't sell them. They're a team that's totally unpredictable. I just wouldn't bet them until you know Cam Newton's healthy. If he's healthy all year, which we won't know. But let's say if he's healthy for half the year, and then you can bet. Okay, then go ahead and bet the over. But the line's obviously going to change, so I would just stay away from it. It's too dangerous of a bet. It's too much relying on health. And when you have to rely on health, it's just not a good bet in my opinion. And it's not a line that's great. If it was 6.5, then I'd totally buy it. But 7.5, nah, it's I don't know. Maybe they win 8. I don't see them winning 9 or 10. I just don't see it. I don't think there's enough talent. I like their coaching staff. Newton, he's just a guy. I think if they start off badly or start off even like 500, if he has a bad game, if he gets banged up, he's a moper, and I think that impacts a team. And I think that he's a guy who I really think could quit. I really think he could quit. Now, I know that's a harsh thing to say, and I don't even mean it as an insult. I think he's just so banged up, man. He's so banged up. He's gotten hit so hard so many times. I mean, he was kind of a battering ram. I mean, he scored so many rushing touchdowns. He would do flips into the end zone. Eventually, that just hurts. it just hurts, man. I mean, I played a little bit of football, and I hurt every day. So for guys like that, he's got to hurt. I mean, and he's put his body through so much. And so when I say quit, I'm not saying he's quitting on his team. I'm not saying he's going to go and sit on the bench and cry. But he could pull an Andrew Luck. He could. If there's someone in the league who could do it, similar to Andrew Luck, a younger guy, practically in his prime, who could retire like Luck, it could be Newton. He's gotten paid. He's had relative success. And he's gotten totally banged up. Am I calling it? Am I saying he will retire? No, of course not. Nobody knows. I don't know. But it could happen. So stay away from the Panthers. Just don't bet them. There are better bets in this league. Bet the Miami under every day and twice on Tuesday. I like the Buffalo over. There are a couple other teams I really like. Check out my other shows. You can find them all on YouTube at the moment. The Footballogists, I have all of the AFC divisions taken care of. And again, in the regular season, we'll be covering every single game against the spread. And the Skipper Dude will come on and give us his insights into sports betting and the basics thereof. And also give us a little bit of his own opinions on the spreads. I'm really excited about it. I'm really looking forward to the regular season and betting these games. But we still have most of the NFC to cover. We've got 2 teams now covered in the NFC South. Up next, we're going to talk about the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons, led by Matt Ryan. Can they somehow find their way back to the playoffs, back to the Super Bowl, after what was one of the most depressing and demoralizing Super Bowl losses in NFL history against the Patriots, where they gave up a 27 or 28 point lead? Can they come back? Can they be that team again? Can they compete while they have Matt Ryan in his prime? The Atlanta Falcons up after this. Atlanta Falcons, another very interesting, fascinating team. 7-9 in 2018, which was a big disappointment. When you have a quarterback like Matt Ryan, who really is one of the best in the league, totally criminally underrated, and you only win 7 games, you know you're in trouble. And it's something that head coach Dan Quinn could be a bit in job trouble if he doesn't turn things around. Because, again, when you have that QB, you got to be at least decent. And they were not decent. They were below average with 7-9 in 2018. Tipico has them this season, 2019, at 8.5, which means, again, if you want to bet the over, they have to win 9 or more. The under, they will be at 8 or less. So if you dive quickly into the Falcons, they are a pretty whelming team in a lot of ways. Their offensive line is ranked 22nd. Their defense is ranked 16th. Their coach is kind of regarded in the middle rankings of coaching. They're kind of a team they're, again, kind of hard to predict. That no one really knows what they're going to do. They were a Super Bowl team that should have won a Super Bowl in 2016-17, and they grasped grasped defeat out of the jaws of victory, as they would say, and somehow lost that game to the New England Patriots, unfortunately, and they haven't really been able to recover since. But this is a team that does actually have a lot of talent, especially on offense. So if their defense can really be the 16th ranked defense in 2019, which is the case according to Bleacher Report, they have them at 16th, which is obviously below average, but right around average. In 2018, they were 25th in points allowed, but part of their problem was their defensive backs. They had 2 major injuries. Keanu Neal and Ricardo Allen were both out for a very long time last year, for a big portion of the season. And obviously, when you're missing 2 of your top guys in the secondary, 2 highly regarded and young safeties, then you're going to have some issues. They're back and healthy, and that's a big reason why Bleacher Report thinks they will be back into the okay range rather than the very bad range. And that's obviously a plus heading into the season. They have, according to sportingline.com, they have the 8th hardest schedule, and they do have a bizarre schedule. We're going to go into that in a bit. A schedule that I really don't know what to think about it. It's really kind of strange. We'll talk about that in a minute. And it's not easy. I agree with them this time that the schedule is quite difficult. Now, Matt Ryan in 2018 had the 9th best QBR. So he was top 10, but yeah, his QBR had some feelings. He had some bad games and bad throws. But he's third. He had the third most pass yards per game, 307. He had 35 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. That's a good stat line. That's top 5 type quarterback numbers right there. He's got Julio Jones. He's got Calvin Ridley as a second wide receiver. Austin Hooper at tight end. Devontae Freeman hopefully back healthy at running back. That's a really, really solid core on offense. When you have a guy like Matt Ryan and you play half your games on turf, you can put up a lot of points. And I really believe that they will this year. Again, I don't love the defenses in this division. And I think that Ryan and the offense can feast. So the question is, can they have a solid defense? Can they win big games? Can Matt Ryan be that MVP type quarterback that I believe he can be? And I actually have him as one of the top quarterbacks in 2019 because of the team around him. And I think that his new offensive coordinator, Dirk Cutter, didn't have much of success as a head coach, but he is regarded as a very good offensive coordinator. And typically, again, kind of depends on who you ask sometimes with these coordinators, but he's a guy who really could turn this offense into a very, very good offense. They were solid last year, but they could be really great this year. And if they're really great and the defense is average, then obviously it leads to a team that could make the playoffs. So immediately you start looking at this 8.5, and I start to say, hey, this could be something more. They have everything you kind of want. They have a head coach who's been there a while. He's in his 5th season. That's Dan Quinn, known as a top defensive mind. He's the play caller on defense, which, as I talked about in the previous segment, I don't really love. I don't love it when the head coach is calling plays either on offense or defense, but if they think he's the best one to do it, okay, maybe it will work. It's worked before. Dirk Cutter is in his first year, so that's a new offense, but at least when you put guys like Julio Jones, Matt Ryan, Calvin Ridley, Austin Hooper, they've played together for a while. They're veteran guys. A lot of their offense is focused on their veterans, and so that being the case, it's a little easier to put them into a new system. Now, I don't love it. They also have Mohamed Sanu. I forgot to mention Mohamed Sanu, who's actually really their second wide receiver. So you have Jones, Sanu, and Ridley, and that's really solid. And then you have Hooper, you have Devontae Freeman. Now, I don't like Ito Smith is the backup running back to Devontae Freeman. Freeman coming off a year where he was injured quite a lot. Ito Smith is... I honestly don't know anything about Ito Smith. I'm looking him up right now. He's in his second year. He has 2 years of experience coming out of Southern Miss, 23 years old. Looks like he had a solid preseason. He's played 14 games in the NFL, averaged 3.5 yards per carry. Maybe that's why I've never heard really of Ito Smith. Nothing to sneeze at. I shouldn't say I haven't heard of him. I've seen his name, of course, but I haven't really researched him because he didn't seem like a guy honestly worth researching. I know that's a little harsh, but it's pretty true. 3.5 yards per carry isn't going to get you a whole lot of recognition in any case. So if you have injuries, but of course with any team, if you have injuries, you're going to have a problem, but there's not a whole lot of depth behind an oft-injured running back in Devontae Freeman. So if he stays healthy, this could be a very good offense. If not, watch out, because teams are going to obviously just load up against Matt Ryan and dare you to run the ball. Other than that, yeah, again, I like the coaching staff. I don't love it, but I like it. It's solid. I really like the quarterback, which obviously is typically the biggest difference in the NFL. Not always, but typically. If you have an okay team and a great quarterback, you're typically in line for a good season. Now, it's not always the case, as we saw last year with the Falcons, who were 7-9. So if we look at their schedule, and it's kind of a bizarre schedule. When I started to look at their schedule, it made me lean a little back from loving this team in 2019. They start at Minnesota, at home against Philadelphia. Oh, that is rough. Those are two really good teams. I really like Minnesota, and I really like Philadelphia. And I like Atlanta, but I don't know. Honestly, those are two games really hard for me to call. So I'm going to split them. And I know this might be actually being a little too nice, too kind to Atlanta. I'm going to say that they lose in Minnesota and they win against Philadelphia at home. Maybe they'll be able to outgun that defense against Philadelphia on the turf in Atlanta. Then it's at Indianapolis. That's a tough game. Again, I think it's one they can win. Indianapolis, I don't love this year, but tough. I mean, those 3 games, Minnesota, Philadelphia, Indianapolis, 2 on the road. That is a brutal start to a season. I mean, totally brutal. Then they're at home against Tennessee, at Houston, at Arizona, at home against the Rams, at home against Seattle. So it really lightens up from the 4th week to the 8th week. And I think they could go on a run. I think they can absolutely beat Tennessee. I think they can beat Houston. I think definitely they beat Arizona. I think they can beat the Rams at home. We're going to talk about that when we cover the NFC West. I'm not in love with the Rams this year, and I think they can beat Seattle also at home. Now, those are both games they could lose, but I've got them winning. So I actually have them potentially winning 5 in a row. So I have them at 6-1 actually to start the season. 6-2 to start the season. So a good start. They have a bye then, and then get this. Listen to this schedule. This is pretty bizarre. Did anyone notice that through those games they haven't played anyone in the division through 8 games? Though half the season they haven't played a game in the division. I mean, maybe that's normal, but to me that it looks totally bizarre. So look at this. So week 9 is a bye, and they're at New Orleans, at Carolina, at home against Tampa, at home against New Orleans, and at home against Carolina. So they have 5 straight games against NFC South opponents. Brutal. I mean, and it's a fairly tough division. So they're going to start, I think they're going to start 6-2. And then you're going to have 5 straight games against fairly tough opponents in the division. Talk about make or break. I mean, week 10 through week 14, watch the Atlanta Falcons because those are some major, major time games. But I do think out of those 5 games, I'm not even going to say which ones. I think they can win 2. And then they finish the season at San Francisco, at home against Jacksonville, and at Tampa Bay. 3 games I think they can win. So I have a hard time predicting every game this year at the moment. Obviously, I'll do it once the games are actually being played. Before, I should say, each week. And I think I'll have a better idea of their matchups by the time especially they come to week 10. Say week 10 at New Orleans, what a big game that could be. But for now, we're mainly looking at the over-under, right? And if you look at what I just went through, I firmly believe, absolutely believe, this is a team that can win 9 or more games. Absolutely. So Typical has them at 8.5. I'm buying that. I actually really like this team. It's not one of my favorites, but I like it a lot. So this isn't just kind of a push. It's okay. I like it. I really like the Falcons at 8.5 because, again, they've got the quarterback. They've got continuity at coaching mostly. Dan Quinn's been there for 4 years now. This is his 5th season. They've got continuity on offense. They've got guys they know each other. Matt Ryan knows Jones. He knows Ridley. He knows Sanu. He knows Freeman. And their offensive line is 22nd, so it's not great. Hopefully it'll be decent. I'm a Denver Broncos fan by birth, I should say, and they played Atlanta in the Hall of Fame game, which obviously we know doesn't mean much, and they got home a bit. So I think that the Atlanta offensive line might struggle. Still, that being said, I really like this offense. The defense sounds like it will be at least solid, and so I really like them to win at least 9 games. I'm absolutely buying Atlanta. I think Atlanta is going to beat the mark set at 8.5 and will be, I believe, a playoff team in 2019. I actually believe they could potentially win the division, which is fairly shocking when you consider that they play in the same division as the New Orleans Saints, who we're going to talk about next. And we're going to talk about just why I think the New Orleans Saints, who are one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl, actually might miss the playoffs. New Orleans Saints after this. Okay, with the New Orleans Saints, I'm going to have some of my hottest takes of the entire show, of the entire series of shows, really. I mean, I've covered all the AFC West. Again, go check it out on YouTube, The Footballogists. You can find every single team covered and my predictions of their over-under for total wins. This is going to be my biggest leap. Now, it's not an extreme leap because everyone thinks it's possible that Drew Brees could take a step backwards, as he did at the end of 2018. He was also not very good in that game against the Rams, which ended in the very famous non-pass interference call, which was perhaps the biggest joke in NFL history, and I certainly hope that the official lost their job. But That still said, he didn't have a very good game. He didn't have a very good end of the season. His stats really took a drop. He was unbelievable in the first 10 games. I think he averaged 37 points per game. He was the MVP candidate, leading candidate without even a question. They had the best offense. They were 9-1, 10-1 to start the year, and then they kind of faded. He really started to regress. You could start to see issues. And Breeze has never been a very good quarterback on the road. Now, he's still one of the best quarterbacks to ever play. I believe he is without question a Hall of Fame quarterback and a guy who is absolutely underappreciated in this league. He's a guy who gets overshadowed over and over and over by guys like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. But he's a guy who absolutely deserves to be in that same conversation, just a little bit below, but still in the same basic conversation. Now, if Breeze takes any step back, even a little step back, he still should be pretty good because he's that great. Now, what if he takes a big step back? There are not many quarterbacks who've been able to play past their 40th birthday. Tom Brady and Brett Favre. And Brett Favre, well, he was Brett Favre, but he still saw some success. And Brady has regressed mightily. Breeze is likely to regress, and he could regress a lot. Father Time catches up with you, with everyone. And Breeze, as great as he has been, it's going to happen to him too. My prediction is it happens in 2019. Now, the problem I have with the rest of the team is that I really believe they're being overrated. They are the number 2 team right now, predicted as the number 2 team, the third team in terms of their line to win the Super Bowl. They're 9-1 to win the Super Bowl, only behind the LA Rams and the New England Patriots. I don't think that's a bad line for New England too. Don't get me started there. They're going to be a really good regular season team. I don't buy them in the playoffs. And for many of the same reasons as I don't buy Breeze and the Saints. I think their quarterbacks are just getting to the end of their careers. And now, yes, I love Alvin Kamara. You can't not love Alvin Kamara. I love Michael Thomas. And that's about it. I mean, sure, Jared Cook at tight end, okay, maybe. He had one good year in Oakland. Somewhat talented, but he's kind of an older guy who's never really done much. Ted Ginn? The dude's got to be 40, right? How old is Ted Ginn? I'm looking this up as I speak. Oh, no, the website's not available. That's how old he is. Anyway, Ted Ginn is the number 2. Traquan Smith, Keith Kirkwood, Austin Carr, Deontay Harris. Those are the other wide receivers on their roster. So it doesn't blow me away, honestly. I mean, aside from a really good wide receiver who works perfectly with Breeze and a very, very good running back, they don't have a whole lot of depth. So if Breeze takes a step back, Kamara can pick up some of it. But if Breeze takes a step back, teams start to just stop Kamara. I don't think there are players on that team that are going to make enough plays for them to be more than a 10-game winner. In 2018, the Saints were 13-3. Tipico has them in 2019 at 10.5. So to buy the Saints, you have to have them winning 11 games. I'm not sure I love it. I don't love it. That's too high. There are still questions with this team. They have an old quarterback. They do have a good offensive line. According to Pro Football Focus, they're ranked 7th. They have a very consistent coaching staff, one of the best in football. Sean Payton is one of the highest respected and talented offensive coordinators, play callers that we have in the NFL. Andy Reid, Sean Payton, Sean McVay, they're about the best. So maybe he can figure some things out. But remember, a couple years ago, in 2015 and 2016, this was a 7-9 team, partly because of their defense. Their defense was really bad. Now, they've improved. But heading into 2019, their defense is predicted by Bleacher Report to be the 20th ranked defense in the NFL, obviously below average. Part of that is because they have some serious injuries on the front line. Sheldon Rankins is injured. Several other of the big men up front are hurt, and they don't have a whole lot of depth there. You know, their secondary is not fantastic. Eli Apple may be their best player in the secondary, and he's kind of a spotty guy, spotty player. So their defense is predicted by, again, Bleacher Report at 20th. I think they could even be worse than that. I don't think they're a great defense. I think you're going to have some games that are going to end up being track meets again, and I don't think Drew Brees is up for it. Yeah, I could be wrong, of course. That this is a bit of a leap, but I've got to take one every now and then. My leap this year is to say the Saints are not a great team. I really think Atlanta ends up being the better team in the division. They're deeper. I like their offense. And I like their quarterback in Matt Ryan. I like them better than New Orleans. So, yeah, maybe Sean Payton is a better coach. Drew Brees has been a better quarterback. But in the end, I think they're going to struggle. They have another tough start to the season as well in their schedule. They started at home against Houston. Should be a win, but Houston's going to come out of the gates because Bill O'Brien knows they've got to win right now. They've got a good young quarterback. Now they have a left tackle. DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller, Kenny Stills now on offense. They don't really have a running back, but they're going to be a solid team. So that's a tough game. Then they're at the Rams, at Seattle, at home against Dallas. Those first 4 games are tough. I've got them splitting those games, going 2-2. Then they're at home against Tampa, at Jacksonville, at Chicago. I've got them winning 2 of those. So we'll say 4-3 to start. And then they're at Arizona. That's a win, 5-3. Then they've got a bye. Then they're at home against Atlanta. I have that as a loss. I think Atlanta matches up really well against them this year. At Tampa Bay, I have Tampa Bay winning that game, as you remember. At home against Carolina, okay, win. At Atlanta, okay, I'll say they win one of them. At San Francisco, tough. At home against San Francisco, at home against Indianapolis. And then at Tennessee, at Carolina. Fairly easy schedule to wrap up. Fairly easy. But that has me around 9 or 10 wins. But I think they actually could fall off. I really think if Drew Brees plays like Peyton Manning in 2015, for example, they could be an 8-8, 9-7 team. It's a tough division. It's not a great division, but it's a tough division. I think there are going to be a lot of tough games. The defenses aren't fantastic, but you're going to have some high-scoring affairs if Cam Newton's healthy, of course. But you got Matt Ryan. I think Jameis Winston is going to have a great year. There are going to be some big scoring games in this division. And if there's a team in the NFL that's going to regress, they're one of them. And actually, I've got 2 in the NFL that I think are going to regress. The other one is in the AFC West. And I think they're actually more likely even to regress than New Orleans. Can New Orleans make the playoffs? Yeah, sure. Of course, they are very talented. But I do think they're being overvalued. Absolutely. I don't really see where all the talent is. I see it in Breeze, Thomas, and Kamara. The offensive line, okay, they're good. They're top 10, so I guess you could say there too. But the defense isn't great. They're below average, maybe well below average. Their depth is not good at all. Ted Ginn is their second receiver. I don't see where people see on this roster they're a great team. I don't see it. They should be a good offense, but I don't think they're good enough. I don't think they're like the Kansas City Chiefs that have such a good offense that their depth and issues on defense won't matter. Now Peyton he's going to get the best out of his offense most likely. He has done that, but with an aging quarterback and an underwhelming defense, no, I don't love him. In the end, the line is 10.5. I think I'm going to sell it. I'm between a sell and a push. I think they absolutely could win 11 games, but I don't love it. I just don't love it. They are being oversold. I really think the Saints are going to regress. I get it. They were 13-3. They went on a monster run to start the year. They were almost unbeatable. But they're going to regress. I can really see them struggling to make the playoffs. In fact, in my show on milehighreport.com for Vox Media, Broncos and Bratwurst podcast, of course, covering the Broncos and the NFL, I have them not making the playoffs. I've got Atlanta winning the division and then Seattle and Minnesota as the wild cards. I know that could be a shock, but it happens every year. A top team always falls, and a bottom team always comes up, or 2. And this year, I think it's going to be your New Orleans Saints. That's what I've got for this segment. Up next, we'll talk just a little bit. We'll have a quick little 5-minute segment about the guys in this division that I think will have an impact on fantasy. I understand most fantasy drafts are probably over by now, so we'll go pretty quickly. During the regular season, we're going to go every week, and select my top daily fantasy team. So it's more going to focus on daily fantasy at the end of every show. That's during the regular season, and that will be in a show that will come up at the end of this week, the week where we start the NFL. Thursday night is the first game the first game where the Green Bay Packers play the Chicago Bears. Up next, a little bit of fantasy in the NFC South. All right, since, like I said, most people have already picked their fantasy teams, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about the NFC South and who's going to make an impact. You all already know and you've heard and you know who you're going to select. Again, we're going to focus more on daily fantasy during the regular season. But I do want to just say real quickly that I'm buying pretty much everyone on Atlanta and a couple guys on Tampa Bay, and I'm selling Alvin Kamara. I know he's a great player. He's got extreme talent. He's got a good coach, good quarterback. But I think, again, that whole team is going to regress. I think the offense is going to regress. Drew Brees is going to regress. And thus, defenses can focus on Kamara. That being the case, him going the first 3 picks, I think is a little high. Now, do I hate it? No, of course I don't hate it. But if I have to pick somebody, if I have to say someone I think is not going to be as good as he was last year, it's Alvin Kamara with the New Orleans Saints. I also wouldn't go Brees too high because, again, as you've heard many times now, I think Drew Brees will regress. So stay away from him. I would absolutely get someone like Matt Ryan above Drew Brees. Guys I like, Matt Ryan, Julio Jones. I would not pick Devontae Freeman. He's too much of an injury risk. I really like Jameis Winston, and I like Mike Evans. Those are guys I am really high on in fantasy. I think they're being undersold, underappreciated, and I think that Arians and Leftwich are going to have a heyday in the division, and they're going to put up monstrous numbers yet again with Jameis Winston. I think he could be one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the draft, in fantasy this year, and he's a guy absolutely to look for in daily fantasy as well as yearly fantasy if you're still drafting. This upcoming week, again, we'll talk more about that in coming shows. I think a show will probably produce on Thursday, right before the Chicago and Green Bay game. I do really like, though, the Tampa Bay game against San Francisco. So if you're picking somebody right now and you just have to have a name, Jameis Winston is a guy to look for. I haven't looked at the numbers yet. Again, we'll get into that in another show, but I really like him a lot. As far as Carolina goes, I love McCaffrey. He's my top pick in the draft. I think he's going to continue what he's been doing. He's going to be the focus on the team. And Cam Newton hopefully will do just enough to keep the defenses from focusing on him. If Newton is healthy, McCaffrey will probably be the top player in fantasy in 2019. That is my prediction. He's going to do it out of the backfield. He's going to catch passes, and of course, he will run the ball like a crazy man. He looks beefy, and hopefully that's a plus rather than a negative. I think it will be. Hopefully he doesn't get too much bigger, but for now, it's going to be good, and he's going to be able to even more beast mode it up on the inside of that line. Otherwise, I wouldn't pick anyone on the Carolina team for fantasy. The only other guy I'd look out for is Greg Olsen because he's dropping really far down the draft. I picked him somewhere in it seemed like the 20th round or something. I don't even know. Somewhere way down the draft in one of my drafts. I just really shocked that he was there. He's obviously injury prone. Don't pick him high, but if he drops, pick him up because he's a guy Cam Newton loves and trusts. He's a really good route runner, and he's a guy who can absolutely score some touchdowns. So Greg Olsen, pick him if he's available down the draft. That's all I've got for you today. Thank you all for listening. I'll be back for the next show covering the NFC North because we've got to get to that division before the game on Thursday night, the game against the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers. Another really, really fascinating division and probably the toughest division in all of football, the NFC North. That will come up later this week. Probably tomorrow. We'll see if I can get to it. Anyway, thanks so much for listening, and stay tuned as always for more on the Footballogists.